Hi, I'm Naisha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Hello, welcome everyone. Today you are watching For the Greater Good with Evelyn Richardson, your host. And today my special guest is Regina Roundtree. Regina Roundtree is visiting us, and we're going to have opportunity to have some dialogue and conversation on the Republican Party and also on community building. Regina Roundtree has taken on this task as a conservative to be able to get the community more informed and updated on choices. We all like to have the opportunity to have choice. Although I'm a Democrat, Regina is a Republican. Certainly there's room for growth, dialogue, and community collaboration. So we welcome you to the show, Regina. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay. So Regina, always I start with tell us who Regina Roundtree is.
Oh, that's such a loaded question. And, I think you can appreciate that as you mature in your life, you can kind of hit your 20s and be one person, then hit your 30s and then hit your 40s and become, blossom into what, you think you really are supposed to be. And, so 40 is the new 30 or 20. So I would say that, first and foremost, I am a woman, a black woman. I have been through my share in life, experiences, trials, triumphs, tragedies, and I think I came to the point probably in my late 30s when I was really starting to get comfortable in my own skin, and so when I examine myself and I say, well, who am I would say that I am growing into the person that God designed me to be, that I'm fulfilling the purpose I think He put me here for.
Amen.
And I think that has to do with being comfortable having the conversations in the community and being able to kind of bridge both sides. In that, I grew up with just my mom and my brother, and we lived in the suburbs. And I went to private schools, but in the summertime I would go to camp in the city. Oh. And so what would happen is I would get made fun of, right? Because I sounded white. I didn't know all the cultures sounded white. Didn't know all the cultures. My language was different, just because of the way I spoke and how I formed my sentences. I didn't understand that then. When you're 9, right, you're just like, why are the kids making fun of you? Right. Because you talk differently. And, that has kind of been my story all through my life. And it wasn't until probably I got into my 20s that I was really, I think, able to bridge and feel comfortable in the black community, even though I did not live there. I was not raised there. And that came from building friendships from work and other places. But it was always still a sense of like being uncomfortable for a while until you kind of had to earn your street cred, right? People had to see you around in the community. You had to start doing the work. You had to start building the friendships and people who, vouched for you. That's and right. So it took me until my late 20s, early 30s to kind of build this cred. Like, okay, well, she's really black now, She's not,
You had to get confirmation
yeah,
from the
community. I know. The community had to approve me. And so, I got my stamp. My certificate in my late 30s. Okay. And so now I think people who know me understand that my desire is to see the best for my black community. I don't care where you are or what your zip code is. And I have a real heart for children, adolescents, especially teens. And I found a way to kind of fold all that together by creating an organization, Connecticut Black Republicans and Conservatives.
Okay, so you created the organization.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, I found it. It's a political action committee. And in creating that, really what I was desiring to do was find a way to build accountability within our urban communities. I had worked in urban centers for a long enough time to see that they were mostly run and controlled by the Democratic Party and those within there. And I saw the lopsidedness of decision making, of outcomes, of policies. And not because I'm trying to say the Democrats were bad. I'm just saying, if you're all in that party, you have one way that you look at something. Like, you know, you're looking at how to peel this banana or how to peel this orange, and you only have, you know, one, maybe two ideas on how to get it done.
Can I break in for 1 second to ask this question?
Sure.
When did you become a Republican, or have you always had a Republican mindset? Was it something that you picked up from your family? Were your parents Democrat or Republican?
So, my mom came over from Jamaica, and, you know, I never really knew what party she was.
Okay.
And I don't even know if I know that she voted. In fact, I never paid attention to politics, probably until I was about 24, 25.
Okay.
Actually started paying attention. And when I finally did register to vote, it was as a Republican. I went on the internet. I went on the internet and I looked at the platforms of both parties.
You know, you can't believe everything you see on the internet, right?
See, you know what? That's so wrong. But the point is, but people don't do this. Go to both parties' websites and look at their platforms. Look at what they believe or what they ascribe to. And for me, back in the early 2000s, it was really clear for me. I had always been kind of entrepreneur, business owner. So
this is the early 2000s that you became a voter.
That I actually got involved and voted, and it just aligned for me. And then what happened over the years is that I realized that people in the party don't necessarily line up with their party platform. And so I decided, though, that I wasn't going to switch because I didn't like the individual, because I felt you'll always come back to the platform. There's always this foundation. When I looked at the history and started researching the history of the Republican Party, you know, of abolitionists, of, you know, they were the first for women's rights and for African Americans to vote. And so those things in history for me were an important foundation. I felt like you didn't leave that because leadership got lost, right? We don't leave the church because the pastor falls into sin. You don't leave God because of that, right? You may not like that individual, but you don't leave some people leave their faith.
So for my edification, because I honestly don't know the answer to this question, when did our country decide to come up with Republicans and Democrats?
That was a long time ago.
You talked about abolitionists, so I'm assuming that, you know.
You know, well, then they were called the Whigs. We had multiple parties if you look back in the 15 and 1600s. And I think
so it goes
way back, and the parties had different names. And I think the Democrat name is probably older than the Republican name, as far as like just the name of it. And then parties started folding into each other, you know, like how we have the Green Party, the Tea Party, the Independent Party, and people are starting new political parties all the time. There were a lot more fractured parties way back in the 1500s. And so the Grand Old Party was a combination of many parties. That's where we got the GOP from, the Grand Old Party. And then we kind of became the Republican, that came the name.
Okay. So tell me, if you talked about the platform for the Republican Party, it was what attracted you. It resonated more with you. Share with our viewers, you know, what are those things that resonated with you from the as opposed to the Democrat Party, the Republican Party believes in, wants to achieve, that attracted you?
I think, we could have a all-day conversation about limited government, right, and smaller government, and enforcing the rights of the individual, and that the government is only there to be as of assistance to us, and not necessarily to be the replacement for all things for us. And so when you look at that, you think that in a world where there's equal access, that is probably ideal. Right.
Okay. Ideal. Okay.
Yeah, it would be ideal to have that if we
Right.
lived in this world of equal access.
Right.
And so, if you're creating something, you set out your vision for what you think would be perfect for whatever your organization is, whatever your mission, your family has a purpose, or whatever it is. You set it out for the best, for the highest calling.
Right.
Right. And so, when I look at and think about limited or smaller government, and that government is there just to make sure that there's justice and protect us as far as public safety, and then we as a people should be able to legislate what our needs are.
Okay.
That's ideal. That's what we want to see happen. I think, and that's what you move towards. Just because it's not happening right now doesn't mean that I think the other options are better, where government takes care of everything. And I realize in history, right, that it was for government that we had the emancipation. It was for government that, lynching stopped. It was for government that, Brown versus Board of Education. I mean, government had to intercede. And so that's it's odd if you go back and you study history, you'll see that Republicans were right there in the midst of pushing all of the segregation, the stopping of the lynching, because when you look back in your history, you'll find that most blacks were Republican because of abolitionists, and because of that particular party wanting them to have a right to vote, have the right to have their own jobs. There were civil rights acts that were written in the 1800s. Mm-hmm. It just wasn't until the 1960s that they were able to get the whole of the federal government, and that means the Democrats, to come on board with enforcing what was law back in the 1800s. And so when I look at that platform, when I think about, just as a Christian, right, faith is important to me, and whether you're pro-life or not, I loved that they had that in their platform. That I appreciated the freedom of religion that they had. I appreciated the ideas too of, because I was an entrepreneur, I understood and I could appreciate that, government, you set so many laws and fees and regulations that sometimes you regulate small business from ever even able to get into the playing field. But of course, then you have corruption, right? And there's the other side of it. And we could talk about big corporations who just take advantage of everybody. So nothing is perfect. But it was the idea that they were striving for, and those aligned with my faith and with what I practiced in my daily life.
Okay. So I don't get to, you posted something on Facebook, and it's the Frederick Douglass Foundation.
Okay, yeah.
So yeah, just share with me about that, about the foundation, and how you're tying in your organization to that.
Okay. So Connecticut Black Republicans and Conservatives, CBRAC, it's a political action committee, but it's kind of meant to be like an umbrella and a bridge. All right. And so the idea is that as I had formed that, and I'd been working and meeting with those people in my party, I had been talking nationally to Republicans, to the RNC, other Black Republicans doing the similar kind of work in different states across the country. One of the things that I realized is that there needed to be a vehicle where you could allow the people to organize, go to Board of Education meetings, to go to town council meetings and talk about the conservative values that were important to them on how they hold people accountable. However, CBRAC was not necessarily the tool to do that. It was just the tool to build the bridge. Okay. So the Frederick Douglass Foundation, it's the Connecticut chapter. There's there's like 27 chapters across the nation. Mm-hmm. And the idea of creating that is so that conservatives, that all people, regardless of your political persuasion, can come to the table understanding that there are kind of a set of policies and guidelines that we believe by as far as Republicans.
We're going to have you hold that thought.
Okay.
And we're going to take a break. We'll be right back in a couple of minutes. Thank you for joining us on accesstv.org. Don't leave. We'll be right back.
At Hartford Public Schools, we care about one thing above all, the future of our kids. That's why we're dedicated to providing all students with the knowledge and skills needed in the new global culture. Hartford Public Schools is thriving. More student success stories, more world-class facilities, more university and corporate partnerships, more amazing talent coming and staying in Hartford. This is how education is supposed to work. Welcome to Hartford Public Schools, where the future is present.
Welcome back. You're watching For the Greater Good with Evelyn Richardson, and our special guest is Regina Roundtree, and we're going to finish up getting a response to the question about the Frederick Douglass Foundation.
So I was saying Frederick Douglass Foundation is a national organization, and so I started, or CBRAC, started a Connecticut chapter for the express purpose of doing outreach into the community as a gathering place for conservatives. It didn't really matter your political persuasion. It was that you were conservative in your ideals, whether it's fiscally, socially, and you wanted to find other conservatives to come and have conversations about in your local community on how do you address some issues of concern. So the Frederick Douglass Foundation, what I've done with that is set up morning coffee meetings. And if you go to our Facebook page or you go to our website, you'll see that in 10 cities across the state, from Bloomfield all the way down to Bridgeport, including Norwich and New London, every month there'll be a coffee meeting at a local coffee shop where you can come in, get a cup of coffee, and talk with some other conservatives. I think part of the problem that I realized when I was doing and creating CBRAC, which is the Connecticut Black Republicans and Conservatives, is I didn't know where to go to find conservatives. You know, you can find Democrats kind of everywhere because in our urban communities, they hold a lot of the leadership positions. So you go to town halls, Board of Education, whatever meetings, you're going to find a collection. But where would you find those who are conservative minds and values, even if they identify themselves as a D or unaffiliated? And so the coffee meetings allow us to find each other, come together, and kind of talk and build a presence and be able to organize, because I do know that when I've gone around to the cities and met with individuals that they have some ideas that they think could be valuable to the community. There just wasn't a vehicle for them to organize, put themselves together. So it is really just a grassroots.
So as you're talking, I'm kind of thinking, I'm like, are the Republicans hiding? Do people of color who consider themselves conservative Republicans feel that because the majority of the population in urban communities are Democrat, that there's something that they feel they'll be rejected because of their political views? Why you have to hunt for them? People aren't out there saying, I hear people in the community just saying, I'm a Democrat. You know, it's like not that strange to hear somebody boasting about, repping being Democrat. But to be honest with you, I have never heard anyone in our communities repping being a Republican. Is this, they feel as though that it's, a stigma attached to being a Republican?
Yes, we do. And that's for many, many reasons. Let's just, and I don't even want to talk about nationally, right? So nationally, we can't control the national news, but nationally, some of the things that get assigned to Republicans, then all of a sudden, every single Republican is this way. And, what I always say to that is we've had some great pastors in the faith fall, tumble, right? Jim Baker, we could go down and name them. Even some pastors in Atlanta where have had their problems. However, nobody assigns that to every black church or every Christian. However, let a Republican stand in front of the mic and say something stupid, or have a group of them push a policy, 12, 10, all of a sudden, every single Republican hates black people, is racist, they're old, rich, white men, and, who can fight that? Like, if that is the stigma that comes out of being Republican, who even wants to come out and say anything?
Well, you wouldn't have to worry about anybody calling you an old white man. So.
Yeah, but then they call me other names, right? So, like an Uncle Tom and a house Negro.
You've heard that literally?
Yes. Yeah. And because you're a sellout, right? And so at some point, there has to be some people, right, who stand up and say, listen, this is not so. Let me explain to you why. And I think there have been places of like huge misunderstanding. There have been places where the party has been wrong on some things, and they've admitted that they've been wrong. Okay, that's fine. So how are you going to fix it, though? Because if you ignore it, then you do nothing to fix, what happened and where we are. And so I think what's happening is there is a movement and a shift across the nation, and where black Republicans and conservatives are saying, you know what, enough of this. And so now there are blogs, and there are radio stations, and there are papers, and there are black conservatives that are running and getting elected for Senate and House seats. And so I think there'll be a shift. You probably won't see it. Really see it probably 5 years from now. It'll kind of look different than it does right now, but we have to start somewhere. And I think that's what CBRAC and that's what I'm doing, is saying, okay, I'm going to provide a covering. Black Republicans, here you are. Black conservatives, even if you're a Democrat or unaffiliated, here we are. Let's get together and actually let's turn the tide on what has been a few generations of us not saying or doing anything.
You refer to it, and I'm curious because I refer to it this way, but I'm on the outside looking in, at talking to you. You say black conservative, black Republican. So is there a difference between a black conservative and Republican as opposed to the latter, a Caucasian?
No. The identification is probably more about the urban community. It's probably more of identifying culture than it is skin color. Because you could say conservative or you could say Republican, and the first thing you imagine is a Caucasian person. And so by putting that term black in front of it, it's almost like once I say that, then there's an assumption, right, that there's this whole culture that I understand, which is the urban community.
You don't think it can possibly be a double-edged sword and kind of separate the black and the white Republican, conservative Republican?
It can be, but I think that within the party, at least where we've had some conversations, there has been some pushback, right, from white conservatives and white Republicans, like, why do you have to have that name? And I have to say, because up until this point, you've never represented my culture very well, right? So I have to do this because I want those outside and even you within to understand that there's a culture and there is a community of people that when you set policies about, when you make laws about, when you say things out of your mouth, that you are offending or hurting or not recognizing. And is there a hope that one day I won't have to say that we won't have to say that? Sure. Did MLK hope that too? Yes, that it's content of character and not color of your skin. Yeah, but we're going to have to move through that.
So with that being said, do you have the support of your of the other Republicans of other nationalities, or is this just something that, you know, black women, maybe black people who are Republicans, conservatives, are just taking on headstrong on their own, or do you really have the support of the whole Republican Party in your area?
So I can say that I'm blessed that I have the support of the whole Republican Party in my area. Does that mean that there are individual people in the party who disagree? Mm-hmm. There are. Okay. But in the sense of when you look at the Connecticut Republican Party and you look at the chairperson, the executive director, and that staff, I am the chairperson of their Urban Affairs Coalition, and they completely, like, we've had some long conversations about this, about where I was going and what was going to happen if you brought me into that space, and that's what they've done. I am also the Urban Affairs Coordinator for Tom Foley's campaign, who's running for gubernatorial. He's at the top of the ticket. Okay. I am Coordinator Director for Penny Bakyaki's campaign. She's the endorsed candidate for the LG ticket. Mm-hmm. So,
and that's Lieutenant Governor?
Lieutenant Governor, yes, LG, sorry.
Mm-hmm. That's okay.
So yes, as far as the party, and then there have been a lot of people all across the state when I've gone to Republican town committees, to conventions, to other events, thanking me for the work that we're doing, that CBRAC is doing, that I am striving to doing, saying what courage, right? And even people within the urban community who are Democrats, like what courage it takes for you to stand out there and say, listen, this is what I am, this is what we're going to do, this is how I want to organize our community, because I think that there are ways that we can work together. And so I'm very blessed to have the support of the party. Very blessed to have that.
Okay. So, explain the difference to me, your opinion on it, the difference between a conservative and a liberal, which I think I'm a slash between both, to be honest. But, you know, if somebody really talked to me that was probably a Republican, they would probably dub me liberal. So, what's the difference for my watchers that might not know?
You know, I saw this chart, which I thought was great, and it had the far right, which are Republicans, and it had the far left, which would be the Democrats, right? And what it had was the difference between group benefit and ideology, right? And so over here on the far right, ideology is very high, group benefit is very low. Over here on the right, group benefit is very high, ideology is very low. And then as you move to the middle and you find your moderates, they start to balance out. And so the biggest thing is that, and you can be, I don't think people think about that, you can be very ideological when it comes to your money. Right, because it's my money. That's right? But you can be very group benefit when it comes to, well, we need arts education in our school because all the kids need this, right? And so there's this kind of balance. However, there will be people that says, well, it's everybody's money, right? So you could have a problem in your community, and there's some people that will raise taxes on everybody, and let's pay for it. Where the ideological person will be like, no, I don't want my tax money paying for that. Right? The parents should pay for that, or, you know, someone should raise funds and have fundraisers to pay for that, but I'm not paying for that. Right? And you can still be a Democrat and be like, yeah, I don't want you raising my taxes so I can pay for X, Y, and Z, whatever X, Y, and Z is. And so if you kind of think of ideological and group benefit and where that balances out, you can figure out where you are. And like I said, when it comes to your money, you could be very fiscally conservative. That's a term, right? You're conservative about your finances. You're ideological. Like, I want to control as much of my money as possible. I want the government taking less money. I want more money in my pocket so that I can buy the type of food that I want. An ideological person will be like, when my kids go and have lunch, the school should not be dictating what they can and cannot eat. It's not their right. I'm the parent. Well, someone over here could be saying, well, if you think about, there are some parents who don't have the funds to buy the healthy food, aren't educated in teaching their children, so we want to put that responsibility on the school to dictate what happens in lunch. So kind of the difference then between, you know, right and left, ideological and group benefit.
Okay, and usually I always tend to get back to this place because the show For the Greater Good came about because Hartford has a lot of nonprofit organizations in our community. And you know, I think about my son always. My son, he does music, and his pen name is Ron Paul. He loves the guy. He feels as though we did a great injustice when we didn't vote him in. I mean, he was out there campaigning for him, and I was like, where did this come from? You know, he
libertarian.
He
That's another conversation.
Say, you know, Ma, get off of food stamps. You know, you can do this. So, you know, hearing him say that as a young man and growing up, and you know, I would listen to him, and he made really relevant, you know, conversations and points about that. And you think of when most people, you know, think of Republicans, they think they don't want to help us survive, and we can't make it because of the disparities. You know, because of the disparities and the inequities and the barriers. So when you think about nonprofit organizations and the fact that, you know, you, in order to be able to help in urban communities where there's you know, there's how do you say it, disenfranchisement, they're disenfranchised. How does the Republican Party play into really being able to keep a balance for those who just really live well beneath the poverty level? Because a lot of people choose to be Democrats simply because they don't think that the Republicans care enough to not allow them to just totally disappear without resources.
Good point.
Because they don't want to pay for it, you know, the ideology, you
Right.
just said it, it's my money. Why would,
Right.
you know?
Are we still on air? Because I see this.
Yeah, we are.
Okay, sorry. I would say that first, let's look at the messenger who's sending you this message that Republicans don't care. You're hearing that from Democrats. So think about it, right? If you're in power and you come to your people and say, you know why things aren't getting better? The other guy doesn't want things to get better for you. Who's in power in your community? Not the other guy. They are.
Well,
So
to be honest, I actually, and I'm speaking from personal experience, I didn't hear it from the Democrats. I heard Republicans that, and they could have been on the far right, you know, way beyond where you and your group might be. But, you know, you would hear those type of things, you know.
right,
So.
I'm going to address that.
Okay.
But most of it, because most people in the urban communities are not going to a Tea Party rally. They're hearing something on the news, national news, right? So let's talk locally, though, right? Because the Tea Party does not control anything in this state.
Right.
I can't control what happens in Michigan and North Carolina and all that. Let's just deal with Connecticut. Tea Party and Republicans are not in control of what has been happening in your community. It's been Democratic leadership. And what they tell you is that we can't get things done because of the R's. But you have the majority. You can vote anything into place that you want to.
Without Congress, without
Without the
LOB,
R's.
without
the
city.
Republicans, because you have the majority, right? So if there's 50 of you and 10 R's, if you vote on something, even if all the R's said no, you're still going to win because you outnumber them. So, all right, so you're coming back and telling people that you can't get things done because of that. To me, that means you're being ineffective as a leader, not the R's, because you have the majority. And so then when you start looking at it, right, so they're being ineffective with their leadership, how they're managing the budget. And we know that there's corruption. We know that there's favoritism. We know that certain organizations, nonprofits in the community get all the big money, get all the big grants, right? We know that those things happen. So imagine now that those on the right are saying, you know what, there needs to be some restraint here. Because you know in your house, right, that you can't have your debit card, and you know you only have $200 in the bank, and you go and you buy $250 worth of groceries. Like, that's just not going to work for you. But somehow within government, we can do that because we take money from here, we take money from there, and we make those things happen. Well, if you do that, then you have to take $50 from your light bill to help cover your grocery bill. But now your light bill is $50 short. And so you do this kind of shuffle game. We know how, but that happens in government as well. And so ours are just saying, or conservatives are just saying, let's be really responsible. How about you only spend $180 on groceries? Mm-hmm. How about if you do that? And then you won't have to take money from your light bill. That sounds practical, right? But in real life, that may be a family of 5 and they can't make it on $180. Like, they really need $250 to feed themselves. Okay, so what do we do? What happens in the community to make that shift, right? What are we supposed to sacrifice? Well, there are areas that we may have to sacrifice that people just don't like. However, you have to understand that your leadership has been wasting your money for a long time. You know what I'm saying? That's not that.
Well,
so don't be mad at the R's because they're like, well, there's been a waste of money. I know, homeowner, mother, father, family, that is hard to hear. So all right, let's hold leadership.
So you're not
account-
saying that the Republicans aren't at all responsible for wasting some of the money along with them, though. That's not what I'm hearing.
No, I'm not saying that they're not responsible, that they're not some responsibility. But I'm saying most of it falls to who's ever responsible for paying the bills in your city, in your state. And even though you've had Republican governors, you've always had a Democratic majority legislature.
Thank you so much, Regina. We're out of time. Thank you for joining us for The Greater Good with Evelyn Richardson. Regina, I would love to have you back to talk some more. You got some great stuff in that head of yours. And thank you for joining us on accesstv.org. See you again next week.